Welcome back to another episode of the Scrubbed In series. I'm your host, Tarek Reset, and on this show we talk to bold minds who are reimagining what healthcare can be. Today's guest is Dr. Shanda Demorest. She's the Senior Director of Network Experience and Solutions at Practice Green Health, where she helps hospitals become more sustainable, from energy use and waste reduction to how the OR itself is run. Before that, she worked in cardiac care, where she saw firsthand how environmental issues were showing up at the bedside. This episode is about how healthcare systems can heal without harming, and how clinicians like Shanda are leading that shift from the inside. Shanda, welcome to the Scrubbed In series.
Well, Tarek, good afternoon. Thanks so much for having me on today. I'm really excited to speak with you.
Pleasure's all mine. Now, you have an interesting journey from the cardiac wards to healthcare sustainability. Was there a particular moment that sparked that interest and the pivoting?
That's a great question to start with. And I actually think my passion for the planet, that started first. It wasn't healthcare where this was built. It was in my home where I grew up. Which I want to tell you a little bit about because it's amazing.
Please.
So I'm originally from Minnesota, kind of the southeastern corner, like right along the Mississippi River. And they call this region of Minnesota and Wisconsin and Iowa the driftless area. And what geologists mean by that is essentially it's an area of the country where during the last ice age, it was basically missed by all the glaciers. So glaciers would sort of approach this area and then recede and approach the area and recede. And what that left was a very unique topographical region. So my hometown was full of bluffs and rivers and valleys, and it was just a very beautiful, bucolic place to call home growing up. Oh my gosh, it was so beautiful. And my family really was ingrained in the environment. And so we gardened. We knew a lot of people that were in sort of the agricultural industry. There was a lot of fruit production where I grew up. We hunted. We were close to the land. We
Wow.
fished. We foraged. So like I grew up in a way that, where I was nourished. Oh, I love that. I haven't used that word yet for this. I was nourished. And so I was just connected with the planet from the outset. And then I sort of accidentally became a nurse. I can say more about that.
Accidentally.
Yeah, right. Like healthcare is fabulous for so many reasons. It's also challenging for so many reasons. And so when I started nursing school, when I started practicing on the cardiac floor in a big health system in Minneapolis, I didn't feel nourished anymore. Let's put it that way. The connection for me as a human was gone. It was so far from what I was expecting. And so I started to ask myself, like, how can I bring the environment, our real environment, the world, back into what it means to care for people? And I think if I would point to one single thing, it's typically a path that a lot of health professionals follow is waste. Because it's so tactile. As nurses and physicians, we're like dealing with all of these single-use plastics and throwing things in the trash at like 30 pounds per patient per day, and that just felt so wrong to me. So that might have been the catalyst, but I think it was like that foundation for me growing up really close to the land, as close as I could, where I just felt morally and ethically disconnected from what I felt like nursing should be.
I love that story and how you discovered your passion. It's been there all the time. You just needed to reconnect to it somehow. Now, if I may share how I got interested in healthcare sustainability, I remember a few years ago, I was in the airport in Dallas waiting for my flight. It was Earth's Day, and all the TV screens were talking about global warming, factories, emissions. And I asked myself, that was probably the first time I asked myself that question. As a doctor, is there anything that I can do for the planet? I don't own a factory to reduce emissions, but there must be something that I can do in my power. What is that thing? And I think it took me a while to Google and find any information that connects healthcare to sustainability efforts, until I realized the OR is probably one of the most, let's say, unfortunately polluting or contributing spaces in the hospital in terms of, greenhouse emissions, which was very shocking for me to know.
Yeah, you're right on the money. ORs are not only some of the most, or really the most polluting, resource intensive parts of the hospital, they're also the highest revenue generators. And so that makes it particularly complex when we look at
To deal
implementing
with.
sustainability initiatives, because those are the money makers and those are the hubs. But that means there are a lot of opportunities there too. Um, Interesting that was your route in. And I Googled. I mean, this was about the time, I was a bedside nurse, trying to find others like me, or trying to get some sense of what was happening in the healthcare ecosystem. I was a Googler too. Like, what is happening in healthcare sustainability? So we need to move beyond individual practitioners just going to the internet, or now Chat GPT. Like, we need to make this a movement. People need to know about it when they're going through academia, for example.
True. Why do you think healthcare sustainability or sustainability in healthcare is such a rare or not commonly spoken or discussed topic? Because I don't think in my group there is a lot of people who know about it, share interest in this, even though it is something that affects us on a daily basis. And especially as doctors, you treat the patient in the hospital, you want the environment also safe, that you're discharging them to it.
The do no harm principle. Yeah, totally. Well, I'll take a first stab at this, but I'm curious about what your hypothesis is here too. Um, I mean, we sort of say that healthcare is approximately 10 to 15 years behind other industries in implementing sustainability, not just initiatives, but like strategy and programming. And I think there are a couple of reasons for why we are so behind. Well, there are a bunch of reasons, but I'll speak to a couple. We're a mission driven industry, like you just said. I mean, we're here to do no harm. I mean, the American Nurses Association Code of Ethics has a standard in there that says, as part of caring for patients, we're caring for the environment. I know there's something similar out of the AMA. Pharmacists have a similar code, and yet there's this disconnect. We don't learn about it in school. Typically, it's
True.
starting to bubble up a little bit, but there's that disconnect between um, actual human health and what's happening to our planet. We also, because we're coming from that mission oriented industry, it's been my observation that there's a little bit of a sense of like, we're doing good, we are healthcare workers, we're caring for people, this job is really hard, which is totally true. All of this is true, and yet not only healthcare professionals on the ground, but all the way up to leadership, there's this sense of we are a mission driven organization, and so we're already doing really great important work. Is it our responsibility to tack on planetary health? Is it our responsibility to address climate change? And I don't think we have enough strong voices coming out and saying, yes, it is our responsibility yet. And maybe the last thing I'll say, and then, like I said, I want to hear what your thoughts are. But um, what we hear from healthcare leadership, like C-suite level, is that environmental health and environmental sustainability is just too far down the ladder rungs in terms of priority. So there's this lens that sustainability is separate from things like risk mitigation or regulatory compliance or cost savings, or health equity. And that's just simply not true. Like, sustainability has all these deep intertwined connections with everything I just listed, and many, many more. So a lot of health leaders like don't have that framework of how sustainability can be great for the bottom line, can improve recruitment and retention, can really build to a healthy and happy workforce. Plus, of course, contribute to a healthier environment and healthier patients, which is like why we're here in the first place.
The
But
ultimate goal.
yeah, the ultimate goal. Well, why do you think sustainability is, to use your word, rare in healthcare these days?
I think maybe first thing is a lot of us don't know what is, or if there is any connection between healthcare and like polluting of the environment, let's say. Like, I don't think it's a commonly known fact that, for example, the gases that we use in anesthesia are big components of emissions. Like, I read that in a paper from Europe. I think they're a little bit more published in that field than us here in the US. I think we don't realize the connection between both. That's why it's not a thing that is important or of a higher importance to us. That's one. And the other thing is, our clinical duties probably, take obviously the top priority for us in our daily work.
Valid. Yeah, both valid. I'd also love to see health insurers coming forward in this way. I mean, what we really need here is like an entire new healthcare model in the United States that's not driven by fee for service, and
True.
that's not designed to be entirely resource intensive. It'll be interesting over the course of our careers to see how we hopefully shift to a more preventative health model. But like, the most sustainable healthcare is the care you don't need. Um, yeah, yeah, very curious.
So, from the cardiac wards, was it directly transitioned to green practice healthcare, or there was some stages in the middle before you reached there?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question. When I tell my little professional journey, oftentimes I think it's sort of in vogue to be like, oh, it was by happenstance and just a lot of great connections. Tarek, I was so intentional about wanting to get to this intersection. And so for people that are really questioning, like, how do I build a career for myself when, at the intersection of healthcare and sustainability or climate change, my path is just one path, but I'll give a couple details because it might be helpful for folks. Um, I mentioned that I became a nurse accidentally, which is true. I mean, really, like my first week in nursing school, I knew that I needed something additional to what I was learning, and I went over to the agricultural college within my university, and I learned about the different programs they had there. Yeah. And I was like, oh man, okay, so how can I connect this passion that I told you about earlier to my nursing education? And so I ended up doing a minor in horticultural science through the agriculture school. And so I was learning about soil science and organic plant production, and basically just getting that more comprehensive education while I was in nursing school. There were no other horticultural folks in nursing school, but I was like, okay, this might be my path.
Your area.
Yeah. When I was working as a cardiac nurse on the units, I was basically trying to build up a little portfolio of what it could look like to be, developing a skill set around quote unquote proper environmental sustainability. So I was getting grants from the county and implementing little recycling pilots on my unit. I was doing waste sorts and getting my hands dirty, and basically trying to, really build this skill set, but also a persona, to the point where, like, I had colleagues coming up to me saying, Shanda, I thought of you when I didn't quite know how to sort my waste properly. Like, show me how to do this. So I tried to really like ingrain
Influence.
in people around me 100%. And then I did a graduate program. So I did a DNP in health innovation and leadership. A DNP is the terminal track that nurse practitioners will follow, but I was able to specialize in essentially environmental sustainability in healthcare. So I was building coursework around like the business case for environmental sustainability. I was learning about change management and, what it looked like to be working in corporate settings for sustainable healthcare. So just like collecting this really wide array of opportunities and experiences at that intersection. When I graduated from grad school, I was super young, and I knew that I didn't quite have the chutzpah yet to be moving into a sustainability leadership role. So I taught for a couple years as an assistant professor, and every course I taught, I was trying to weave in climate change. I was,
Sustainability.
sustainability and clinicals. And so just very intentionally collecting different experiences that helped me build a broader picture. And eventually I saw a job opening with this incredible organization and I jumped on it. But one reflection I've had, because so many people ask, like, how did you get a position in this field? Most health professionals, unfortunately, that are really interested in this work have a sense that passion is sufficient. And so, passion about a healthy planet is absolutely critical, but it's not going to be enough, especially in this era, to get a
To make a
job
change.
to make a change that is, a sustainable change across an entire unit or health system. You need a little bit more. And fortunately, there are a lot of really cool diploma programs and certificates and educational courses coming out that offer those skill building opportunities for folks too. I know that was long winded.
I mean, I love your journey. You're nourished environmentally from young age, and then you grew up, interested to learn more from academia and business standpoints of how to develop, the world of sustainability in healthcare. That's very nice and interesting, and explains your. Now, at practice green health, uh, how does it work? Am I a hospital executive coming to you to asking you, hey, how can I make my hospital greener? Is that how it works?
Good question.
Or is it the
Yeah,
other way around?
both and additional routes as well. So increasingly, health systems are basically creating positions for sustainability leadership. Most often, this, maybe the mandate comes from the C suite level, but typically there will be either a sustainability director or a sustainability manager that has purview over like operational efficiencies, increasingly like climate mitigation or resilience planning. And so those are the primary people that we work with. So we have about 1,700 hospitals across the US, a little bit up into Canada. There's also a global network that is led out of our sister organization, Healthcare Without Harm, functions similarly. But we'll sort of get outreach from healthcare leadership or these traditional sustainability professionals and say, hey, we're looking to really bolster our sustainability program. Maybe they want to set some goals. Perhaps they're looking to, build their network with other health systems in their region or across the country that are, pursuing similar initiatives. And so we work with these folks to try to help them build sustainability strategic plans and to better understand some of those very basic change management principles, data collection elements, evaluation. And then such a really exciting part of this work, I think, um, is basically employee engagement and culture shift to really help health systems move from perhaps seeing sustainability as a siloed project that's coming out of the facilities department or something to, embedding it deeply within every layer of a health system, within every department. And in many cases, we're seeing this trickle down to health professionals and maybe even patients too.
Now, you've touched base on a few interesting points that I would like to know more about. So first, you said many hospitals nowadays are having a push towards achieving or developing their sustainability efforts in the hospital. Uh, I mean, that's great, but what was the motive? I'm just curious. Is it legislation from the government, or is it there's a benefit of some sort that they are seeing?
I'll speak to both. I mean, so it's May 2025 right now. Rewind back to the presidential administration before our current one. We worked in a very climate friendly admin with President Biden. And in my 6 years in this role, the single thing that I have seen contribute to the greatest momentum for healthcare sustainability was a pledge that was put out by the Biden administration. It was a voluntary pledge. It came out of HHS. It was the health sector climate pledge. And basically, there were three goals in it. One was to establish executive leadership buy in for this work. One was to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So we talk about carbon, but there's also methane and the anesthetic gases, as you referenced. Reduce the full system's greenhouse gas emissions 50% by 2030 and 100% by 2050, those operational emissions. And then the third goal was to develop a climate resilience plan. And almost 1,000 hospitals signed on to that pledge voluntarily, in part because there was like so much momentum from peer systems signing on. That was voluntary. Another voluntary example coming out of the Joint Commission, so our regulatory agency for about 80% of healthcare, established the Sustainable Healthcare Certification in 2023. And so that's basically an add on to the typical regulatory process for hospitals. And that Joint Commission certification, because it was coming from such an influential regulatory body, health systems were much more apt to look at that and say, well, we're already seeking, the Joint Commission certification on our safety and our, workplace environment. Let's tack on this sustainability element. So there has been some general federal, but also just ecosystem momentum that's contributed to that increase. But then the other piece I want to speak to is, one of the challenges I said at the outset is that a lot of leadership isn't fully understanding the
Right.
intersectionality of like sustainability and cost savings and environmental health and patient health and operational efficiency and retention and recruitment. But there are some leaders that really are. And so when we are able to work with some of those influencers that do deeply understand and also just sort of propagate this concept that sustainability is not a tree hugging enterprise, like it's deeply connected within the other priorities that leadership is caring a lot about.
Caring about, yeah.
Totally. Yep. It's starting to grow.
And how much would you say right now of the hospitals or the hospital systems across the country are involved in some sort of, sustainability efforts?
If I had to estimate, our Practice Green Health Network is about 1,700 hospitals, like I said. There are 5,000 ish in the US. So help me with math here. It's maybe around 30% thereabouts.
30%.
That does not exclude or let's put it this way, there are definitely hospitals doing important work that aren't part of the Practice Green Health Network, but they're in the minority. Yeah, and I'll also mention, globally there are about 70,000 hospitals around the world that are developing formal sustainability programs, and so it looks different. That's the thing; they're not all necessarily particularly robust. Some of them are very, much in their infancy, which is still an important place to start. But yeah, about 30% in the U.S. at least.
I mean, you got to start somewhere.
Totally, exactly.
Sustainability in a hospital. What does that mean, at least in its simplest forms?
That's a lovely question. I know I'm trying to think of like the definition of sustainability outside of healthcare, just the true definition of sustainability, which is, essentially not overutilizing the resources that we have in the hopes of sustaining a healthy future. I think that applies to healthcare in its most basic form. The ways in which this shows up practically are things like energy and water efficiency, sustainable procurement, like in the supply chain, working to reduce waste, working to reduce harmful chemicals, working towards healthier foods because there's a deep interconnection with climate and food, and climate resilience. How to build your hospitals in a more resilient fashion, but also how to better embed some of the climate needs of the community with sort of the ethos of healthcare.
Got it. Now, if a hospital, you said like it's some hospitals need to have structures that make them greener, for example. Is it too late for a hospital that's already built or constructed? Or is it something that applies only for hospitals that are in the building phase, let's say?
Sure. It's definitely not too late for buildings that are already established. I'll give you one very specific example here. Boston Medical Center is one of the most environmentally sustainable facilities as far as healthcare goes on the planet. They're a safety net hospital out of Boston, so take care of, some of the most marginalized patient population out there. They were in the market for developing a behavioral health center. And what they ended up doing was buying essentially like an old defunct nursing home, renovating that, and they actually renovated it to be a net zero facility. So what that means is all of the energy that is consumed on site is either generated on site via renewables or is purchased via exclusively renewable electricity and energy. They've implemented all sorts of energy efficiency modalities. Even if you're consuming renewable electricity, renewable energy, reducing consumption is always the first step.
Definitely.
So yeah, so I mean, they have one of the most innovative net zero facilities in the country, and it's from an old nursing home. There are also so many efficiency mechanisms that can be put into place that don't require like a full retrofit, like I just mentioned. You were talking about the operating room earlier. One of the most effective energy efficiency actions there is called HVAC setback. And this is just like a sexy term that anybody that's working in buildings should know about. HVAC, of course, heating, ventilation, air conditioning. And in the operating rooms, it's very typical to be having the air circulation going 24/7, just absolutely premium, heating and cooling mechanisms. But there's not a patient on that table 24 hours a day in most cases. In some few cases, obviously, it needs to be environmentally appropriate for the patient care. But by implementing those HVAC setbacks, systems are saving tons of energy and tons of money. So those are just a couple examples of how built infrastructure can be really meaningful as a focus area for a sustainability initiative.
Now, let's say using these like the HVAC setbacks or whatever green technology for the hospital, I'm pretty sure that involves a lot of upfront initial maybe investment from the hospital, which probably people at the C-suite don't like as much.
Yes and no. Yeah,
Yes and no.
I'm going to stop you right there. Those HVAC setbacks, I mean, all that requires is working with the facilities department to adjust the sensors that are already in place. So implementing some different timing tracks. However, I will say this. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit that can be that can be captured that has financial savings for a system. Anything resource conservation is going to lead to money. However, once health systems kind of grab all that low hanging fruit, sustainability initiatives tend to become more expensive because then you're looking at some of the alternative energy routes. You're looking at electrification of buildings. All of this is quite expensive. But the earlier stuff, no, not only is it not supremely expensive, you're also going to, save the bottom line.
So there is, rewards or return on investment by going into some sustainable efforts in the hospital.
Immediately. Yep, exactly.
I love that. And probably C-suite people love that as well.
Yes, right on. And you mentioned anesthetic gases. Let's use that as an example too.
Yeah.
I'll make it super specific. So there's, and actually, Tarek, I need to ask you this. What is your specialty?
General surgery,
Yeah. Okay. Do you use a lot of desflurane where you are?
SIVO, and isoflurane.
Okay. Do you know the history of whether or not y'all used desflurane?
No, actually. That would be interesting to know from you. The
Well, it'd
story
be
about
interesting to
it.
know. Ask the people who might know in your org. Okay, so I'll just share a story that's becoming more and more common across healthcare now. Maybe it happened in your facility, maybe not.
Okay.
But data coming out of, like you said, Europe, but also the US as well, was identifying desflurane as having an extremely potent global warming potential. Basically, estimates were that it was about 2,500 times as potent as carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas. And so this really became the target of some sustainability professionals to try to phase that out of the operating room. But here's the thing that really garnered leadership support, and then I'll speak to clinician support in a second. Well, you should speak to clinician support with me in general surgery, but it was the most expensive gas on the formulary. So by phasing out DES in favor of ISO and SIVO, systems were saving on that global warming impact while also saving financially. I'm definitely not from general surgery, but presumably, if y'all aren't using it, like, is there clinical pushback around any of the patient impact there?
Not that I know of, as far as I know.
Nice. Curious. Yeah, so I would ask around, see what happened to desflurane. Why did it go down?
I will. So desflurane is more environmentally potent and it's more expensive, you're saying.
Exactly. You got it.
Good to know. Good to know. That'll be my next question to the first anesthesiologist, I say.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. A, B, or C, which is worse?
Which is worse. Now, it's important for, after implementing some of the sustainability efforts in a hospital or in a healthcare system. I was reading in the website is that there's data and parameters that need to be collected and reevaluated. And by that, what are those kind of data that we're looking for?
Sure. And you're asking about something that is probably, I mean, from a business perspective, like practice greenhouse greatest value proposition right now. I mean, we work with all of these facilities that I've mentioned to support them through that data collection. And then we do really deep individual facility analysis, but also aggregate sustainability benchmarking across the sector. So I would say generally there's been this deep industry shift towards accounting for greenhouse gas emissions across the entire facility. And so that shows up in metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents. And the most typical places that folks are getting greenhouse gas data is from their utility bills. They learn how much energy they're using for their daily operations, and that's keeping the lights on and keeping the temperature at a certain range. Um, Greenhouse gas emissions also come from transportation. So obviously, what are the fleets of the health systems putting out in terms of a carbon footprint? Or even employees and patients getting to the hospital, that technically counts as the carbon footprint of a health system. We could talk about supply chain. You might think this is interesting. Approximately 70 to 80% of an entire health system's greenhouse gas emissions hails from the supply chain.
Really?
Yeah. So the things they're bringing into the hospital. And then most of it ends up as
In the
waste
OR.
used in the OR, and lots of waste. Yeah. Then there's food, there are, medications and pharmaceuticals. So this comprehensive evaluation of a health system's greenhouse gas footprint is really what is the main hot topic right now for most sustainability programs in healthcare. Other data that is particularly compelling, at least to me, especially from like a leadership systemic perspective, is getting an idea of what sort of the governance infrastructure looks like for sustainability programs in healthcare, because we're trying to replicate that and help people understand how to build really strong environmental programs from the outset. And since so much of this work has been voluntary over time, I love looking at some of that more qualitative infrastructure, like systemic data that we can learn from to build everything else on top of.
Now, if 70 to 80% of the emissions you're saying come from the supply chain, which is probably, I'm guessing, it's the most difficult part to tackle or to modify or adjust. How can we fix it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I'm curious why. You're correct. The supply chain is, one of the most difficult elements of sustainability to work on. But what made you say that?
Well, I think, because the hospital is a constant, at least the OR, imagining from an OR perspective, you're in constant need of equipment and, and these things you can't compromise on. Say, okay, yeah, let's, maybe schedule a bigger delivery later on or something like that. So everything has to be constantly available all the time, primarily for patient safety, at least, I'm guessing. So how can we modify the supply chain, and maybe partly it is outside the hospital's control as well, I'm guessing.
Yeah, let's pick up on that piece. And you're right in the way that you're thinking about this. A health system's emissions from supply chain can also be, depending on the framework here, can also be the responsibility of the manufacturers and the suppliers that created the widget in the first place. Asterisk, those suppliers and manufacturers are not unequivocally taking responsibility for the emissions of their widgets. So, for instance, like if you and I are in the grocery store and we buy an orange, is the environmental impact of that orange our responsibility, or is it the responsibility of I'm trying to
The
think of
farmer.
the farmer.
The
I was
farmer.
trying to think of a brand of oranges. No, that was not a good example. But is it
Smiles.
or of cuties, exactly. Is
Exactly,
it the
yeah.
cuties' fault or is it our fault?
Both.
And fault, but both, right? It's kind of a tricky. It is a tricky, sticky wicket, but I like your answer of both. So here's one approach that we are really exploring at Practice Green Health right now. Is basically a collaborative for working through emissions reduction that is both healthcare coming to the table and industry. So that could be the manufacturers or the suppliers, and collectively saying, look, we know we've got some problems here. We need to reduce our emissions for the good of the planet, for the good of our company, for the good of our audience members and patients. So how do we sort of double the efforts going into this and be more creative and collaborative in the problem solving? What I will say is that most of healthcare in the US is nonprofit. Most of manufacturers and suppliers in the US, and even more broadly, are for profit.
For profit.
Yeah. So it's not always in the best financial interest of these corporations to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions in partnership with healthcare. So and that's a cultural thing that we're up against when it comes to all of these challenges.
I like that. So maybe there should be some sort of legislation forcing those manufacturers to be more sustainable or environmentally friendly.
Totally. We're starting to see that a little bit in California.
Okay.
There were a couple Senate bills that came out that, well, they're requiring the what's the word I'm looking for here? The disclosure. Sorry. They're requiring disclosure of their greenhouse gas emissions for large manufacturers and suppliers and other large corporations in the state, and for companies that are buying from others within the state. But that's, even though California is big, that's just one state. It's very dependent upon political waves. But we do see that in other countries. I'm just not as familiar with it, from what's happening in the U.S. But I like your idea of legislative advocacy.
I mean, a question I've been asking device reps sometimes: what's the carbon footprint of your device?
What do they say?
They usually don't know. What is even that?
Oh. There are some manufacturers and suppliers that do really excellent work in this space. Vizient is an example. We have Medline and Cardinal that do have sustainability departments and sustainability leaders. But you got a company like that makes so many widgets, it's really difficult to, actually have data or, for example, a life cycle analysis of every single product that's coming into healthcare, which is another reason why this is so challenging. I have no idea the number of items that are, on a unit in the PARX, but it's a lot. And every single decision isn't necessarily using environmental sustainability as a lens to make that decision.
Now, for the success of implementing any sustainable efforts in a hospital or healthcare system, the clinicians also play a role in that for the success of it. What are the things that we should be aware of? And from your experience, have we been good in implementing those efforts, or we've been not so good?
I'll never put the blame on clinicians for this work.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh man. I mean, I was there. I don't practice anymore, but I was absolutely there, and it's hard to hold that sort of moral and ethical conundrum, and also to be doing your day job, which is hard on top of all of this. I'll never put the blame on clinicians. I think that in many cases, the most powerful action a health professional can take is pushing the people in power. And so, for example, you and I can have the absolute best intentions for reducing our environmental impact as a direct care professional, but that's going to be one person. And even if you talk to your colleagues and get them on board, maybe that's 4 people or maybe it's 12. But if a health system doesn't have comprehensive embedded sustainability commitments and programming across the entire system, all of the departments, it's going to be swimming upstream for folks that are on the ground every single time. So that's why using the voice as an advocate and helping our leadership understand, look, this is good. You can always start with the bottom line, then they're going to listen. But then all of these other really important elements of sustainability that align with their priorities, health professionals can have such a powerful role there. And I'll also just say, it's really imperative that health professionals that are super passionate about this work, that already have sustainability programs within their hospitals, that they're working hand in hand with those sustainability directors or those sustainability managers who have really well thought out priorities and strategies for how to help make, the organization healthier from an environmental perspective. And with my little story of waste, if we did not have a sustainability professional on site, so I was just one little pocket trying to do one little thing. But sometimes health professionals can have so much passion and so much momentum, but that could actually pull away from some of the organization's broader, sort of more well thought out priorities that work towards some of the biggest environmental impacts. So talk to leadership and start asking, hey, is there someone in my organization who is leading sustainability? I want to work with them to help advance their priorities.
So leadership is the first to go to and the key in evolving these efforts in the hospital, probably.
Yes, absolutely. And that's another great place, Tarek, where, there's definitely power in numbers. And so rather than, rallying your troops in the general surgery suite to do one specific initiative, you can use that political capital, that social capital, to push leadership to do something even broader across the system.
I love that. Now, throughout your career, is there an example that you've seen or you think had a dramatic switch from before being environmentally sustainable to after, and what were the effects felt by the hospital, the patients, or the community?
I think I'll tell the example of Jackson Health System down in Miami. I had been connected with a union nurse down there who had a lot of passion, was working in a system that did not have sustainability programming. And she worked with her union actually to go to that health system leadership and to get that buy-in to say, let's build a sustainability program, let's hire a sustainability professional, and let's see what we can do. And so over the last probably about 5 years here, this grew out of the passion of a single nurse. Now they have system-wide environmental sustainability programming. And one really exciting example of something that we at Practice Green Health are now working with them on is basically we have a decarbonization and climate resilience cohort. And so basically it's safety net hospitals, essential hospitals that are really in need of financial support for climate climate adaptation and mitigation programming. And they are working to do a comprehensive assessment of all of the ways that they can reduce their environmental and greenhouse gas emissions on the ground. They're working with communities to build a climate resilience plan. And so, they've gone from one passionate nurse, and I'm sure there were other passionate folks here and there, but she took the spark. She used her voice. She worked with the union. She got the buy-in. They built the program, and now they're decarbonizing.
Wow. So all that started by just one nurse.
Yeah.
Crazy.
That was Caitlin.
Caitlin. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
How long does it usually take? I don't know if that's an appropriate question. Does it take for a hospital system to go from the analysis phase? Okay, where are we in terms of sustainability efforts, to finding out what are things we're doing wrong and implementing those changes and seeing results?
It's a complex answer because we don't want folks to get stuck in analysis paralysis and just
Right.
collecting data, until the cows come home. Yeah. So, I mean, we actually recommend, using the phrase "till the cows come home." That's how you know I'm from the Midwest.
I love
But
it.
yeah, I know. Sorry, back to these cows. This task at hand. Dual approach. So yes, be collecting data where it's not overly burdensome to be, getting utilities information or getting some basic emissions information. But simultaneously, it's important to just get some small wins as far as like simple sustainability initiatives that can be implemented, ideally with some cost savings, so that folks can demonstrate to leadership, look, we're not only just in this for the numbers and the data collecting, we actually can implement projects too. So you might say, well, don't you need some amount of data in order to go through the change management process and actually have a positive impact? Yes, to a certain extent. At the same time, there are some very basic initiatives that you can get off the ground without having a ton of information. Here's one little clinical oriented example where maybe it's difficult to quantify the exact emissions, but there's other stuff we can measure. There have been different examples in multiple health systems of waste reduction initiatives in patient rooms. Very common practice when you're admitting a patient to bring in all the things, just like you said, like in the OR, or similar initiatives in the OR. You're prepping the room based on a protocol that perhaps was established many years ago, but at the end of the day, whether it's in a patient room, whether it's in the OR, you end up throwing away a lot. You can identify that is an issue without knowing how many emissions are being are being created in that. You can implement some very basic processes to better evaluate what do we actually need in here, and calculate the waste avoided and the cost saved, the money saved, by just some very very basic process changes. You can be doing that simultaneously while collecting data on some of the other bigger picture energy, energy efficiency opportunities. So that's just one example. To your question of time, hopefully that simultaneous approach, is something that you do need dedicated staff to do, and that's why it's important to have those, a sustainability leader at least on the ground. It's not typically led by a single clinician, for example.
I mean, I didn't know how much hospitals, unfortunately, or in the OR, we waste instruments. Like we open them, we don't use them, and we need to sterilize them. And then I realized that the amount of energy and the emissions that comes from that, and the cost of the hospital is quite insane from, just opening extra unnecessary stuff.
Isn't that disturbing? Yeah.
Very disturbing.
Start asking questions. OR kit reformulation is kind of the term that we used for that. And I think you'll win a lot of friends if you make some recommendations around, what if you're doing a hip or you're doing a knee or whatever it is that you're digging into that day, the suggestions to be more mindful around what you're actually prepping will end up saving a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's sometimes difficult just because, you're not sure what you're going to be dealing with. Sometimes
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's the only difficult part in controlling that element of unnecessary instruments.
Also valid. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, since we are living in the world of AI hype, that's an interesting question. Has there been any AI and AI intersection with implementation of sustainability efforts? Has that thing occurred or evolved yet?
Spicy. Yeah. This, well, probably like other industries, and one of the main topics that come up, at least from an environmental perspective with AI, is that it's much more energy intensive. And that is, at least for right now, a perpetual challenge. On the flip side, things that I'm seeing that really intrigue me and give me some hope. So we talked a little bit about some of the HVAC setback and sort of like building infrastructure and that sort of thing. We've learned from some hospitals about the power of building automation systems where sustainability professionals and facilities folks are working with different AI programming way beyond the OR, which is the example that I just referenced earlier. But basically to be assessing what is the occupancy in the different rooms of a hospital, both patient rooms, but also just units in general. What sort of trends are you seeing with with weather and with seasonality, where really health systems can be optimizing to a much more sophisticated degree, lighting, heating, air conditioning, ventilation in that built environment. So that's something that, is actively reducing energy versus, the typical argument that we hear about AI being, really energy intensive. Yeah.
Right. Now, who is in the world of sustainability and in healthcare? Who do you think should be leading the efforts and the transformation?
Patients. Here's why I say that. I'm not providing a realistic answer here, but this is like the pie in the sky thinking. Patients are the consumers, right? They are the end user. So in the same way that we're trying to deliver patient care for the end user, which we're not always great at, I'm just really compelled by the idea that there are choices that we as consumers of healthcare make. And could we get to a point where patients are choosing to seek care in more environmentally sustainable healthcare organizations? The next layer I'll say is actually health professionals, the largest percentage of the workforce. Just a couple brief data points there that are kind of compelling. So annually, Deloitte consulting company puts out a survey for global millennials and Gen Zs. I'm sure we're going to get another generation in here soon. But it is a global survey with thousands and thousands and thousands of respondents. And basically this year after year, we're learning that those generations are prioritizing environmental sustainability and climate action in their decision making for where they seek employment. And so there's a really powerful recruitment and retention element here that has totally not been tapped into. Right now we're seeing, bits of passion leading sustainability in different health systems, but I think, the being patient driven and then being health professional driven is so much more powerful. I'm saying this as a nurse, but that's so much more powerful than somebody in the C-suite saying, we should do this for X, Y, and Z reason. Of course, it needs to come from the top and the bottom up. But I just think with the masses of people in power, we're on the cusp of that.
So could the transition be in the hands of the next generation? Is that what you're trying to say?
Oh, I want it to be in this generation. We don't have time to wait.
Exactly. Maybe too late.
Yeah, exactly. We need support from the next generation, of course, but we're starting now.
Definitely, yeah. The sooner the better.
Sooner the better. Yeah,
Sooner
we're
the better.
rolling.
Now, if I am a hospital executive with limited power, let's say, and something of least effort, least dramatic change that I can implement in my hospital or my healthcare system, to say that I am trying to do something sustainable, to do better for the environment, what would that be?
What is your objective? Do you want more environmental impact, or do you want more recognition and understanding to shift to a culture change?
So the answer depends.
It depends. I'll speak to the impact piece first. Energy efficiency. That's the best place to start. It's also one of the easier places to start because it doesn't require broader employee engagement. You can do a lot in the facilities department, save a lot of emissions, save a lot of money. But that's not sexy. People don't necessarily care about that. People care more about styrofoam cups.
Styrofoam
honestly.
cups. Okay.
Yes. If I had a nickel for every complaint about a health system not being able to phase out styrofoam cups, I would be a rich woman. But there's something to be said there about what what employees and what patients are fired up about, because giving that public perspective, granted, obviously there is impact here, but if you're going to focus on styrofoam cups, that might be the biggest feel good initiative, even though the actual impact is far lower. So it depends on the motivation.
Okay, so let's say to gain more recognition and acceptability within the community, what would that change be? What's the sexy thing would be?
Mm-hmm. Well, what are the public-facing things, and how can they be best communicated? I mean, I wasn't joking about the styrofoam cups. That's one example. Really helping to engage the community in the process is something that I think we can do a lot better job at. So for example, trying to understand what does the community care about and what is of highest priority to the community, which includes patients. So starting to ask some questions about what is most meaningful to them as far as their health system decreasing the impact on the environment. Solar panels are really, really visible. Electric vehicle chargers are really visible. And so this isn't to say that these things shouldn't be happening simultaneously with some of the bigger emissions reduction. And obviously, solar panels are leading to a lot of emissions reduction. But it's that nuanced balance of, what are some of the greatest actual environmental impacts with what is sticking out to the community. The last thing I'll say on this is a lot of health systems struggle to really celebrate and amplify and communicate about what they're doing. And so a tight relationship with a communications and marketing department, put it on social media, be taking a lot of photos, get billboards up. That makes a difference in today's world.
True. I mean, I like the point that you touched on, the engagement of the patients, since, the hospital and the patients, they're all within the same community in a way.
Yeah.
And what our patients think is important should be the priority of the hospital or the system or the leadership.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think I wish we had a better model for this when it comes to quote unquote actual healthcare delivered, because I think we all have examples both as clinicians and as patients where the things that the patient cares about are not necessarily the things that are of top priority to the actual health system. So there's a catch there too, but we certainly can be doing better across this full range of both traditional care delivery and, as we're talking about, patient health from an environmental perspective. Let's start asking and actually start responding and listening to what people are saying.
I like the change of the momentum that you're trying to introduce.
Yeah, blue sky thinking here.
I love it. So on that note, what would be, if you had a room full of residents, nurses, PAs, and you want to give them a message, what would that message be?
I read a quote recently from Audre Lorde. She's a philosopher, poet, civil rights activist, and she said, "Caring for myself is not self-indulgence; it is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare." And I think it would be tone deaf right now to respond to your question without taking into consideration the broader context of everything that's happening in the US and the international political landscape. And just like we say, for providing care to patients, like you can't do it with an empty cup, or we need to be well in order to help others be well. That same principle applies to environmental sustainability. What's really cool about this, though, is that this coming way back to the beginning of our conversation, where I was nurtured by the environment and by the planet. One really powerful way to care for yourself, to better help you care for other people and the planet, is just to get outside. So be the animal that you are, and you will be so much more well as a human to be able to make a big impact in this space.
I love that. Very deep. Shanda, thank you very much. That was Dr. Shanda Demorest reminding us that sustainability in healthcare isn't about choosing between care and climate. It's about realizing that one depends on the other. Her work shows that real change doesn't always start in policy rooms or press conferences. Sometimes it starts at the bedside, with a clinician asking, "Can we do better?" If this conversation sparked something for you, share it with someone who's ready to think differently about what care really means. Stay curious, stay bold, stay driven. Shanda, you're officially scrubbed in, and I'm your host, Tarek, signing off. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tarek.